As a lot of you guys know, I'm preparing for an amateur championship in the middle of July where we're going to be playing 3 different courses. And one of those courses I have not played at all. So I was trying to compare it to the 2 that I have played using the course rating and the slope. And I had no idea what I was looking at. So I went into kind of a deep dive and looked at all the math that goes involved of those 2 numbers. And today I'm going to share that with you because I think it's helpful information on how it affects your handicap and the scoreability on that course. I also been watching a lot of YouTube golf, and a lot of popular YouTubers out there have been playing the Oakmont. And I wanted to know, based on the slope and the course rating and my handicap, what I should be scoring at Oakmont. And so we're going to do the math at the end of this. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. So I got some notes here because there is a lot of math involved. And if you're not into math like I am, a high school math teacher, this might be a little boring. And if you don't want to do the math, but you just want to know what math is involved, you can also use like the Gin app or pretty much any golf app out there to calculate your course handicap. And that's all that slope and course rating really does, is it helps you, if you have a handicap, compare other golf courses and have a course handicap which might be different than your handicap. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. So let's start with just kind of going into a scorecard. I'm going to be playing each one of the courses that I'm playing. And the first course is this course right here. And it has a course rating of 70.8 and a slope rating of 120. Now, let's first dive into what the course rating is. The course rating is the expected score for a scratch golfer on a perfect day. It's not when it's windy, it's not when it's raining, it's like a perfect condition score. Now, that course rating is based on the course layout, of course, the amount of hazards, the amount of bunkers, and just the overall difficulty of a course. Now, this is a par 72 and has a course rating of 70. So this plays easier than the par for a scratch golfer. Now, if this was a higher number, like a 74 or a 78, this would play harder than par for a scratch golfer. It's a pretty easy number to understand. So the lower the number, the easier the course. The higher the number, the harder the course for a scratch golfer. Now, I said scratch golfer because there's also a golfer called a bogey golfer. A bogey golfer shoots 1 over par on each hole and usually shoots a 90 on a par 72. Those skills of a bogey golfer is different than the skills of a scratch golfer. So they have what they call a slope. And the slope is the difference in difficulty between a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer. Now, this says it's 120. It doesn't mean a bogey golfer is going to score 120. It's the difference on how difficult the course is compared to based on a slope. So if you remember in your probably high school math, there's y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. I know this quite well because I'm a high school teacher. It is basically the same thing. It's the rate of change based on the scratch golfer and a bogey golfer. And this is very important to find your course handicap based on the slope and the course rating. Now, the reason why they do this is because bogey golfers don't hit it as far, they don't hit it as accurately, and hazards and bunkers play a bigger differential than a scratch golfer. And I have seen many times a bogey golfer getting into a sand trap and taking 2-3 attempts to get out of that sand trap, while a scratch golfer might only take 1 or 2 attempts to get out of a bunker, depending on the bunker. So that is why there is a bigger discrepancy between a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer. Now, looking at the slope rating, a 55 would be the easiest for a bogey golfer, while a 155 would be the hardest, and 113 is about average for a bogey golfer. So when you're looking at that score, if it's above 113, it's a little bit harder than average, and if it's below 113, it's a little bit easier than average. So looking at the scorecard again, the slope is 120. So this is a little bit harder than average for a bogey golfer. Now, how the slope is calculated is they take the difference between the course rating for a scratch golfer and a course rating for a bogey golfer, and then they multiply that by a constant. There's two different constants that are multiplied. There is a men's constant at 5.381, and then there's a women's constant that is at 4.240. Let's take a pretend golf course and say that the course rating for a scratch golfer is 72 and the course rating for a bogey golfer is 90. That would be like what you think a scratch and bogey golfer should score. Now we take the difference of those two. So we take 80 minus 72 and we get 18. And then we multiply it by the men's constant, which is 5.31. And you get a course slope of 95.58. So that is actually way easier for a bogey golfer than average than most courses. So that kind of tells you, even if you are scoring 90, you're actually doing better than a bogey golfer would on most courses. That's something to think about when you're playing golf and you are scoring in that 90 range. You are not a bogey golfer. You are actually doing better than bogey on most courses. And I think that's why your handicap kind of reflects that. So let's move on to course handicap. The reason why you want to do course handicap, because some courses are easier than others. And if you're playing a scratch golfer, most likely you're going to get more strokes than what your handicap says. So just make sure that you do this correctly. I am going to do a course handicap on something that I recently played with my friend that is a 4.4 handicap. I'm a 12.4 handicap. We decided we were playing 9 holes. We decided to give me 3 strokes. We played match play. I ended up winning outright. I didn't even need those strokes, but let's just say that 3 strokes was that fair based on our handicaps. And so to find the course rating, you actually take your handicap index, you multiply it to the slope rating divided by 113, and then you take that number and then you add the course rating minus the par for that course. So the course we played at was a beautiful link style course. We played off not the tips, but one in front of the tips. It had a course rating of 68.8 and a slope of 121, so just a little bit harder for a bogey golfer. And so I take my handicap of 12.4, multiply it by 121, which is the slope rating, divided by 113, which is the average slope rating. I then take that number and then add it to the course rating, which is 68.8, minus the par on that course, which is 72, and I got a course rating of 10.07. So 2 below my normal handicap. I did the same thing with his 4.4, multiplied 121 divided by 113, and then added that to 68.8 to minus 72, and his course rating was 1.51. And so there's a differential of handicap of 8.53, and then I divided that by 2, and I should have got 4.26 strokes, or rounded down 4 strokes. Now, that didn't have a big change from our normal 12.4 to 4.4. It still would have been 8 strokes divided by 2, and it would be 4 strokes. But you can see if you were dealing with a scratch golfer and a higher handicap golfer, while that might give you an extra stroke on the whole 18 rounds. So please make sure you use your course handicap. Again, you do not have to do this math. Almost every app out there does this for you based on handicaps. So you can use the Gin app. I think 18 Birdies does it. I personally use GolfPad, and GolfPad does it. So I would recommend finding that course handicap instead of just using your handicaps and finding that differential, because courses are harder for bogey golfers, and this accounts for that. Okay, so here we go. What would I score at Oakmont? So I looked up Oakmont's slope and course rating. Their course rating is a 78.4. And just remember, they're not a par 72. They're a par 70. So that is 8 strokes over par that they expect a scratch golfer to do, with a slope rating of 150. 150. That's almost the maxed out difficultiness or difference of difficultiness between a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer. And remember, this is not based on a par 70. This is now the differential between a 78 and a bogey golfer. And that's how much harder this course is for a bogey golfer. That's why you see a lot of, like Bob does sports, he scored super high. And this because it's the differential, or the slope is such a high difference between a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer that he's not going to score well. All right, so I did my 12.4 handicap. I put that 150 and divided that by 113, multiplied those two numbers together. I added then the course rating, which is 78.4, minus the par for that course, and I got 24.86. So I should be getting 24 strokes compared to a scratch golfer, and I technically should score around a 94. I don't think that's going to happen. That also tells you how off the course rating and slope can be. And so I think I probably would score in the hundreds on that course, but we probably will never find out. I'll probably never play Oakmont, but just to say that, hey, this matters. Even though I'm a 12 handicap, there are harder courses out there. There are harder slope ratings for bogey golfers out there. And so please use your handicap. Hopefully this has helped you out to understand the whole slope rating and handicap system. If you want me to go in a deep dive on how a handicap is calculated, I'd love to do that. And until next time, make golf your project, and I'll see you next video.